Hey everybody, that's right, a Shattered Dimensions re-review, because YouTube has seemingly decided to cut all of the audio from the original review and make it go the way of the dodo. I'm here doing this again. And to be honest, it's probably a good thing, because I was actually planning on doing a series of Beanox related Spider-Man videos, and what a way to kind of do this than to start off by the original. Hopefully you guys don't crucify me like you did with the original post, though, because I doubt my opinion is going to change much, but we shall see. Without further ado, this is Shattered Dimensions for PS3.
Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions is a game that is exactly how my original review was perceived, polarizing. There's a lot of things about the game to enjoy and like, but there's also a ton about the game that could be grating on the patience of the gamer, and not exactly great. The game was released in 2010, a full year after the now industry-changing hit Batman Arkham Asylum had released. To say that the Spider-Man game had a lot of stiff competition would be an understatement. The game had a lot going against it before it was even released, and that's not even considering the comparisons to Arkham, the much more infinitely better game. You had the very real Spider-Man fatigue setting in with Activision's mandate of having a Spider-Man game come out every year or every other year coming off of the massive failure that was Spider-Man 3, and the snowball effect that game had on Web of Shadows. The quality of these Spider-Man games was in massive decline, and gamers knew it. More and more of these Spider-Man games were being released, and more gamers were perceptibly looking at these games that they knew the devs were cutting corners on in order to meet ridiculous release dates the publisher had mandated. Shattered Dimensions looked to bring us back to a time where Spider-Man games were perceived as good, and while the intentions were there by Beanox, ultimately what we ended up with was a very meh Spider-Man game. No, Shattered Dimensions isn't outright terrible, but it's not exactly the greatest game either. Firstly, from a plot perspective, it's very straightforward. I won't go into as much detail here as I did in my original review, but the entire plot goes like this. Mysterio wants a mystical tablet by the name of the Tablet of Order and Chaos. Very original, I know. To sell on the black market to, in his own words, make a mint. In the ensuing battle with the Amazing Spider-Man, the tablet breaks in fragments and travels across 4 different dimensions. Madam Web then shows up and lets Spider-Man know that apparently this random tablet that was just on display here, and not in the hands of someone like Doctor Strange or something, is the most powerful of all the mystic artifacts, and is now shattered throughout various dimensions, and recruits 4 different Spider-Men from those said dimensions of the universe's Noir Ultimate in 2099, and enlists their help in recovering the fragments and saving the multiverse. That's about it. If you're looking for some great plot or a memorable villain, you looked in the wrong place. This game is all about the novelty of bridging the generations of Spider-Man over the years into one spot, and if nothing else, the lasting legacy of this game is that it was the very sole reason for something like Spider-Verse, both in comics and in film, to exist, as this was the catalyst for Dan Slott, who wrote the game, to fully commit to that idea in comic books. This is where the game shines at its brightest. The distinction made between the 4 Spider-Men is amazing from all of its cosmetic appeals. Each Spider-Man has a uniquely tailored experience meant to give the impression that they're unique. From Amazing and Ultimate Spider-Man's very heavily cel-shaded comic book stylized graphics to Noir's very dark and gritty old-timey atmosphere to 2099's more futuristic utopia. The game does a very great job of making everything look different, and to top it off, the voice cast is superb once again, bringing in different Spider-Man voice actors, such as Dan Gilvezan from the 80s Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends series, and his portrayal of Spider-Man 2099, to Christopher Daniel Barnes from the 90s animated series and his portrayal of Spider-Man Noir, to Josh Keaton from the critically acclaimed Spectacular Spider-Man series and his interpretation of Ultimate Spider-Man, to Neil Patrick Harris from the MTV Spider-Man the New Animated Series as the Amazing Spider-Man. All of these guys do a tremendous job, even if I do feel at times Neil Patrick Harris can be a little too eccentric. I'll take the energy he has here versus how he used to sound in Spider-Man the New Animated Series, however. But I still stand by my comments that the 2 breakout performances for me in this game come from Nolan North's Deadpool and John DiMaggio's Hammerhead. North's Deadpool is zany, comical, insane, and perfectly captures the essence of the Deadpool character, to the point where it's going to be really damned hard having to try and convince myself that he can be the lead singer of the Bee Gees over in Marvel's Avengers, and to not have it be totally distracting. But John DiMaggio's Hammerhead is the stuff of legends. To me, he is Hammerhead. His cadence, his nuance while breaking things down, and while he's not allowed to be extremely graphic in his threats, they all come across the way a sadistic mob boss would threaten somebody. He's perfect. And it's really a shame that Insomniac didn't use him in their game, But considering how that turned out with Hammerhead there, perhaps it was for the better. I always look forward to playing this Noir level just due to his performance alone. Seriously, I cannot say enough good things. Look up the level for yourself if you don't own the game and just listen and become enthralled in his performance. He was perfect in Spectacular Spider-Man and he's perfect in this. But the question remains, is as a game, how does Spider-Man Shattered Dimensions hold up? And the answer back then was not so well, and upon revisiting, I still feel the same way. The biggest problem Shattered Dimensions had to tackle from a development standpoint was making each Spider-Man unique and different from one another, not just on the visual side, but from a gameplay perspective as well, and this is where they faltered heavily. Despite the fact that each Spider-Man has a gimmick per se and unique moves that are tailored to them, it doesn't change the fact that gameplay-wise, Shattered Dimensions is embarrassingly formulaic. Each level has you going through large areas, dispatching of enemies and saving civilians, and dealing with the same type of enemies but with a new coat of paint on them to make them seem different on a surface level. To then meet a mini-boss toward the middle of the level, to then meet the same boss at the end as an enhanced version of that boss being affected by the tablet. Is because of this that the novelty of playing as 4 different Spider-Man wears itself out incredibly thin by the second half of the game. You've seen what the game has had to offer, and the only thing that's left that's really holding it up are the different environments and the interactions you have with the characters in the game presented to you, which isn't outright terrible as the interactions and jokes are all really written well. But it's the process of getting to them that makes it a grind. You have 14 levels in total, which doesn't sound like a lot, but these levels tend to drag, taking about 30 minutes each on average to complete. Spider-Man Noir's levels are the only levels that tend to break up the monotony as they don't rely on beating up goons in wide open spaces repeatedly, and has more of an emphasis on stealth and world building, making these levels brilliantly unique and a genuine joy to play through. It's why whenever the conversation of this game tends to come up, the first thing usually brought up are Noir's levels, and it's because it's the only thing in the game that stands out as unique, while everything else is way too familiar and similar. It's not to say that the combat in this game is absolutely terrible, because at its best, it's passable, albeit very unpolished sometimes, which you could say about the entire game really, but I do quite enjoy the animations, however cartoony they may be, for Amazing's web attacks, and just how chaotic the symbiote attacks are for Ultimate Spider-Man. But you do become desensitized to it just due to the nature of the game. As mentioned before, each character has their own gimmick per se, and we already know that Noir's sections are heavily based in stealth, so what does that leave for the other 3? Well, Amazing Spider-Man, as mentioned before, has a lot of webbing-based attacks, and that's pretty much it for him. Spider-Man 2099 has accelerated vision, which allows you to slow down time and get a good amount of hits in until the meter runs out, or dodge a lot of the rockets that the levels like to throw at you, specifically in his. And Ultimate Spider-Man has a rage mode that unleashes a variety of crowd control-like moves that whips all kinds of surrounding enemies around, giving you a good taste of the power fantasy that the black suit has. Again, my main gripe is that the 30 minutes or so you're in these levels, you beat up so many of these faceless drones that so much of it becomes samey, leading to the game feeling very marathon-like. I can only enjoy these levels after taking an extended break from them after having played maybe 2 or so of them before jumping back in. The game tries to throw some variety in there by way of the Web of Destiny, which serves as sort of an objective list for things to complete within the levels that they're tied to. With every challenge met, you can then in turn redeem these for an opportunity to unlock combat upgrades or character upgrades, whether that be for things like health, extended gimmick meters for 2099 and Ultimate, to additional suits for each of the different Spider-Men. The suits are an awesome feature, but I do feel that the Web of Destiny is a bit rough in its execution, as some of these challenges will have you going back to some of these levels if you're not paying attention to them on your first go-around. Specifically the hidden spiders. Oh boy, the hidden spiders. It makes it so that levels that you aren't totally in love with become a chore as you have to revisit them and go through the entire thing again, just so you have the ability to further progress your character or unlock a certain skin you really want. And to me, that's just lame. I'd rather there be an XP bar, because at least then it doesn't feel like the game is artificially lengthening its time, having you go through these arbitrary processes, and you're progressing naturally. But it doesn't stop there. Doing the challenges merely unlocks the opportunity to unlock them. You still need Spider Essence, which is the game's currency, to actually unlock them, and this is where the game loses me entirely. I hate grinding in video games. Life itself is already a grind. Why make me have to work twice as hard for an upgrade here? You earn this currency by defeating goons, collecting tokens, and obtaining a cumulative score that's given to you at the end of the level, grading you on your combo points, your collectibles collected, and overall time to finish said level. Having these be locked by one thing is enough. By having it be locked behind two separate things without there being a real reason for it, outside of again arbitrarily lengthening the game time, is just not good design. It doesn't equate for fun. It feels very much so like a game that is on a tight time constraint, and this was their way of compensating so people wouldn't complain about how short the game was for a $60 price tag. All of this doesn't help the game, especially when in comparison to its competition, which again released a year prior and had pretty much gone the opposite direction of what Shattered Dimensions did. Fully polished, unique story with a good villain using an XP bar to gain additional upgrades. The only thing Spider-Man had Arkham beat on was suits. Perhaps being spoiled by how good Batman was and just being soured on Spider-Man games after the mess that was Spider-Man 3 tainted my view on Spider-Man games for a little while, but I truly do wish that I could have enjoyed Shattered Dimensions more. But there just wasn't enough there for me to really grab. It just felt like another yearly release Spider-Man game with some interesting ideas, but not enough time to make it truly unique. It's not to say that if you enjoy this game you like bad games. Again, this is just my opinion. Some of you might love this game, and that's okay. I enjoy aspects of the game myself, but it's not my favorite Spider-Man game, and it's not something that I actively go back to try and play either. Shattered Dimensions is an okay time, and for Beanox's first official entry into the Spider-Man character outside of porting several games to the PC, they did a half-decent job. Up next, I'll be looking at the other polarizing Spider-Man game coincidentally made by Beanox, the one I actually have yet to play until this very review, Spider-Man: Edge of Time. I'll see you guys on the next review.